The Houston Cougars fall to Oklahoma State in what's kind of feeling like an indescribable fashion. We're going to try and do that and a whole bunch of other stuff we've never really done before here at Locked On Cougs, Cougars After Dark. Let's jump on into it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who can stop by, and on a night like tonight, there might be a few of you, be sure to subscribe down below. That way you can get latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day, or tonight on Cougars After Dark Live, perhaps your final listen of the evening. Obviously, we're doing a giveaway over 250. We're getting close to 1750, so hit subscribe, help us get there. Like, comment on the video. If you can't think of what to say after this, tell us, what's the biggest shouting match? This might be story time. What's the biggest shouting match you've ever gotten into? Now, we're going to talk about what we're doing tonight because we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to kind of split this up into two episodes, almost lumped into one. And then on the back half, I'll cut them and put them in different feeds as responsible. For the Cougars After Dark folks or the people listening to this in the regular podcast feed, this is a bonus episode every Saturday night, right? But we'll be doing one long episode talking about the football game first and moving forward that program, and then the basketball thing second, because happy things come second, and moving forward with that program. So if it feels a little jumpy here at the start or end, because you're listening to it after the fact, I'm sorry, but that's the way that goes. We do have some comments here, but again, I want to stress we're going to jump into the football game first and all the things that come up with that. So let's jump into and talk some about the football game. We got some commenting here. People, I'm a Seminole fan here. That's interesting. People commenting about getting rid of Dana Holgorsen. Obviously that's a thing. Kenneth here is pointing out. Steve here mentions that, we might not be firing Holgorsen, but he's frustrated with the things Fertitta said. I want to talk some about the game tonight. And the second segment, I actually want to talk some about what comes next, because I think people are really eager to get to that part already. But on Saturday night, I think it's kind of easy to lose sight of, there were moments, and I don't mean to be too heavily optimistic about a game we lost by 2 scores, but there are moments that felt like you could beat Oklahoma State, or you should have beaten Oklahoma State. I think that's probably why it hurts as much as it did, is that there were probably moments that they should have beaten Oklahoma State. They open up the game. They get a pick six to score their first touchdown. They get a second touchdown with a interesting personnel choices. Jonah Wilson on the field for the first time. A big-time freshman at Decaney. He catches a 60-yard bomb from Donovan Smith. And then before halftime, you had a big, after a couple plays, it wasn't just a trick play drive, but down just outside the red zone, Joseph Manjack threw a pass back to Donovan Smith for a touchdown. And suddenly Houston was up 21-9 with 10 minutes left in the second quarter. And then what ultimately, however many minutes later, what time of the game was that? 4 minutes. So 6 minutes of game time later, they got a safety to ultimately make it 23-9. Fun facts across that one. First of all, if you go back and watch the trick play, my favorite thing to watch on that play, because I've sent it to several people as a football coach, it's really fun to watch that. The left side of the offensive line, Patrick Paul included, throws dummy bad cut blocks before ultimately getting up and then leading a charge down the field to set up a screen pass back to the quarterback. All that is to say, 4 minutes left in the half, you're up 23-9, 14 points on a team that, again, has a strong possibility of making it to the Big 12 championship game, right? Competitively, that's good. Those are good things. And then inexplicably, you've got a big-time interception thrown by Donovan Smith with about 2 minutes to go. You're driving with the ball at that point. You just got a first down. You're on second down. So he had gotten a first down the previous thing. First down, then get a short run, and then second down, throw an interception. Almost, it effectively gets taken back for 6. It's not quite for 6, but 2 plays later, Oklahoma State has scored from inside their own 25. And then you get the ball back with like a minute and a half left, just checking, and you ultimately have to punt it away. You can't get anything done in that instance, and then you give up a field goal after that. So from going up 14 points in the halftime, again, against a team that's going to compete for the Big 12 title game, potentially, like odds are they will, right? You go from 4 minutes before halftime up 14 to at halftime up just, 4, right? Like that is somewhat of a catastrophic fall off itself. And then you open this first half and it's a 5 and out, not a 4 and out, not a 3 and out, because they do get a first down in there. But you have to punt it away. And then in punting it away, you give up a long drive touchdown with some big Ollie Gordon runs in the middle. Then you turn around and punt it right back. You give them a 2-play, 63-yard drive, right? Big Ollie Gordon run for 60-plus yards in that one, right? You punt it right back. They punt it right back, a little punt back and forth, give them a field goal. They get it to 36. Anyway, once it's 36, you're like, oh, my God, it's 36-23 still. We hadn't scored in a long time. But then you end up pulling off a touchdown play kind of on a whim. I almost want to say there wasn't a singular play that sticks out. There was a big completion to Manjack and a big scramble from Smith. But really, that was kind of a solid drive. And you cut this lead back down to 1 score with 7.5 minutes left. And you've had some punting back and forth. You feel like you might have figured something out. And then you haven't. Oklahoma State takes a 5-minute drive to go 78 yards and score a touchdown and ultimately ice this game at 43-30. You did get the ball back against 2 minutes down 2 scores, and we've seen crazier stuff happen in the past. But that was, in effect, ball game. Now, folks have been commenting while I've been talking, wasted season. I don't like going that far, but it's been a rough one. Dana's a con man. That's the way you feel about it. We have Fertitta put it out there, but Dana Hilliker's not on the hot seat with him. That's the commentary from Friday when they broke ground in the new facility. And then a tech buddy said that he liked Donovan, but referred to him as the human interception. Starting to see that the past few games. I think his interception problems have gotten worse in the last couple games. I think, honestly, that's part of people are getting tape on him in the Houston system a little bit. The one tonight right before halftime was bad. And there were a couple things tonight that were bad. The one thing we did not talk about through our quick recap there was an atrocious keeping the drive alive that ultimately led to a touchdown for Oklahoma State penalty. That was done by, I believe it was Malik on the defense. Bad penalty. Guys tackled, you can't clap in his face. Just can't do that. That's always been a penalty, always will be a penalty. Now, I will say I don't like those penalties from a personal level. I think football is an emotional game. It's more fun when guys are getting after it. But I thought it's always been a penalty. And we heard in the post game, Dana Holgorsen comment that obviously that cannot happen. Cannot happen per Dana Holgorsen, but it did. And there were a couple things that cannot happen, but they still did, that Dana commented on, air quote, cannot happen. And so I think it was interesting to see that play out. Now, a lot of that to me happened on the defense side of the ball. I want to spend this second segment talking about what happens next, but I am particularly tired of losing. And if you're also tired of losing, head on over to PrizePicks. Get on the PrizePicks app today. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege. They'll match your deposit up to $100 for your first time deposit. Doing a bunch of fun things over there. You can do all kinds of combined winnings. You can do like a basketball player and a football player, and they'll do like an over-under of like receptions and 3-pointers. And if they set it at like 10.5, you know, Travis Kelce gets 7 catches and LeBron James gets 4 threes, boom, you're over the top of it. LeBron James shooting really well from 3. Really timely read on that point. They also have cool reboot policy. So if a guy gets hurt in the first half and does not come back in a football or basketball game, it does not come back in the second half, You get rebooted. You don't lose any money on it. It's a really cool thing that only Prize Picks is doing. Their only daily fantasy sports platform with that type of injury insurance policy. Make sure you check them out. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for our first boss match up to $100. Against prizepicks.com/LOCKEDONCOLLEG and use code LOCKEDONCollege for first boss match up to $100. Prize Picks, make sure you win this weekend because we did not. All right. Defensively, I mentioned the too many men on the field thing, and there was a couple moments where the defense did inexcusable things, and I don't know how else to put it. The defense had 10 guys in the field and spent a timeout early in the first half. The defense had 12 people on the field. The defense was subbing while Oklahoma State was going tempo. The defense had 3-man personnel, was trying to run 4-man stuff. The defense was in all kinds of problematic situations in this football game that are frankly and bluntly not super Division I Power 5 level in any week, but definitely not in the 11th game of the season. They just aren't. They just weren't. And in the post game, Dana Holgorsen said he's going to work with his coaches and talk through it, and the people will be held accountable. I think we all wonder what's next with this program because we see Houston in the hotbed of football and basketball, for what it's worth, that is Houston, ascending into the Big 12. And we know this program has been as recently as 2016, honestly. Well, frankly, we kind of backed our way into it in 2021. We see how strong this program can be. We see Big 12 resources on the way. We see them breaking ground on a new facility on Friday. And at that facility meeting, Tillman Fertitta and Pesman and so on, multiple people, high-dollar people, highbrow people, high people in charge, comments, things about Dana Holgorsen being somewhat safe. And I think that surprised, based on some of the comments I can see in the section here, people being a little surprised by that. I mean, I got one person, Kenneth here, I'll go back and play that comment up again, says it's time for Dana to join the unemployment line. What's interesting is that I've been trying to say for a while, I think there is a change coming. And I think between the play on the field and the comments after, we get a little bit more light into what that change will be. As good of buddies as I think Dana Holgorsen and Doug Belk are, I think, frankly, it's going to be time for them to move on from that relationship. Because if I look at the Houston Cougar football program, Houston has given up, they got just 14 to UTSA, but we know Frank Harris was, coming out of a wheelchair a couple weeks earlier than that. They got 43 to a JT Daniels Rice team. They got 36 to TCU. Give it 38. They scored 38. They gave up 49 to Texas Tech. They gave up 39 to West Virginia. The 31 to Texas, obviously with the backup quarterback playing a chunk at the end. Kansas State, 41 points. Baylor, 24 points, and Baylor is at the bottom of the Big 12. And then Cincinnati, 24 points. And then tonight, the 43-piece from Oklahoma State. Now, I understand points are not everything, and some people I really respect in the sports media landscape, the people, I consider myself more of a content creator than a journalist, and other people delineate all different ways. But talk about how the defense is on the field all the time and they get worn out and they get gassed out. And my constant rebuttal to that has been, yes, but a defense's job is to make their game short. A defense's job is to get a 3 and out and get off the field. So if you're on the field a lot, that's actually indicative of poor performance on your own right. It's not just that the offense isn't sustaining drives. It's yeah, but your job is also to get the offense back on the field. And I get that there's two sides to that yin yang, but I also think that truthfully, the defense has been porous this season. Now, as Steve points out here, and I've said this to this point, but I'll let Steve say it because I think you'll like seeing other people say it besides me. Doug Belk is a sacrificial lamb. Thank him for a sacrifice. We would probably fire an OC if we had one. I think that's fair. I think the things you'll see happen next season, if looking at what happens next, is you're going to have a lot of people say they're only going to, buy season tickets if there's a head coach change. Only do this, only do that. And administration is going to pump up a new defensive coordinator. I would, frankly, I don't know what he says about coverage, but Brian Early is a great coach. You got him on staff. if you can't find someone else out there to come in and be a potential sacrificial lamb again. I think that's an attractive job to people across the country. I think you'll also see even if it's a backdoor kind of demand for an actual offensive coordinator. I've said for a while now, this offense looks like it's lacking coordination. And that is to say that like there's nothing being set up over the course of a game. And so I could see them doing both of those things moving forward that ultimately keep this thing hopefully moving in the right direction. But I am, based on people I talk to that have a lot more money than myself, again, teacher and coach, I think that you got just too much going on with people that are okay with Dana riding the ship if they see the Big 12 as being difficult and all kinds of other things. I think the truth is that would mean that 2024 Dana has new coordinators. You probably need to have a spring game to show those guys off a little bit to build up some excitement. You hope you can pull in some people in transfer portal to play for those new coordinators and the excitement that comes from there. And then ultimately, you go in the 2024 season hoping for better results on the football field. You did have some close competitive games this year. As bad as you looked against Cincinnati, it was a 10-point game, right? As hard as it was to stomach it, you lost by just 7 points to Texas, right? I think that there's stuff to build on all of that. You could also, I guess, flip that around if you wanted to. Then 2024 happens and say things don't get better. All right. You look at the Dana buyout, the years are wound down a little bit. The back couple of years of that, only 60%, not full percent. It's still up to $14 million over the next how many years, but you still, you're winding down into that a little bit. You also know that your building is being finished. You can sell that to a potential new coach in 2025 if things are not better in 2024. I just think that's the more realistic timeline. I will say, I say all that with an asterisk on it right now, because there is some large thing going on Twitter where I still call it Twitter. I'm sorry. Where people are discussing some back and forth with fans and Dana in the post game as he's coming off the football field, and fans were chanting loud enough here on the TV about Dana in the post during the game. To be fair, the student section was not quiet, and kudos them for not being quiet. That's their right as a fan, right? But there's no video of it. I posted on Twitter that there is a picture of a person filming with their phone. So if there was a good video, that would be out there. And it sounds like what happened was they were chanting at him. He walked over and didn't really say anything provocative, and then was ushered off the field before anything could happen. Without anyone having anything that he would have said provocative back to the fans. I don't think that'll be a thing. I will say that, part of the thing people like about Dana that like him, probably the thing people hate about him that hate him, is that he very much is going to let you know what he's feeling when he's feeling it. Right. And so I'm not saying writing off that couldn't have happened, but that's the way it goes. If something like that were to come out, obviously that'd be a little bit different and change things up a little bit. I have this person telling me that I'm full of it. It says, I've heard people cancel season tickets if DH returns. If Browse or Herman come back, we just have fans that like to complain. If we win, non-fans buy tickets, whomever is coaching. And this person talks about building a future. 8 commits not going through the cut it. I think it was interesting. Someone says, this person also says, Mike St. Green, that he'll be be renewing his season tickets next year for darn sure. Because he didn't say darn. I will say, in looking at those kind of comments on recruiting, I think my biggest thing was not necessarily, and I talked about this back when that happened. You can go back and check out the episode with Brian. That the comments themselves rub me the wrong way, even if that is actually, even if the strategy is transfer portal and JUCOs and those kinds of things. Saying it out loud was the thing that rubbed me the wrong way. I think they got a strong set of 8 kids in the 2024 class. I think they have a strong handful of kids already committed in the 2025 class. I just can't believe he said that still. Even if you really believe in the veteran guys, I can't believe he said that. I want to talk. I want to go a bunch of different directions with this, and I want to talk some about the rest of the Big 12 and football as well. But again, I want to stress that like there were positive things to pull out of the game, including things like you kind of jumped out early on them and you thought things were going to go your way. And so when someone like Athletic Brewing asks for a game changer because they're changing up the game with their own non-alcoholic brews, I go to Joseph Manjack. I think Joseph Manjack caught a touchdown and threw a touchdown. And frankly, if they let him run, I'm sure he'd run for one too. Joseph Manjack is turning into a workhorse of all workhorses, old school work ethic mentality, all that kind of stuff. The no gloves attitude very much resonates with him. He played really, really well, I thought, amidst all other kinds of chaos. I will say that just like he has changed the game or trying to change the game for the Houston Cougars in the right direction, Athletic Brewing is changing the game by making a fit for all times beverage you can drink it anytime, anywhere, with any activity and make it more enjoyable. No hangovers, nothing like that. You can go find it in store or online at athleticbrewing.com. I have long advocated for those sours, especially on a hot Texas day. An ice cold non-alcoholic sour is really, really good. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, and get 15% off your first order. That's LOCKEDON at checkout at athleticbrewing.com and get 15% off. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Now, lastly, I want to talk about going around the Big 12, but I think we'll start with our game. How about that? That way we can wrap up talking about this one. The things that bugged me defensively, right? We mentioned that part of the defense job is to get off the field. And we talked throughout the week about like they're down a couple receivers. Ollie Gordon's a Heisman candidate once upon a time this season. Got to stop things. And at halftime, they kind of had slowed Ollie Gordon down. Ollie Gordon finished with 25 carries, 164 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Even if you take out his 62-yard long, he had 24 carries for 102 yards. That's a first down every 3 carries, right? That's abysmal. And the funny thing is, I actually kind of feel like the defensive line played well. It's abysmal. It's abysmal. And I think what's worse is Brendan Presley, the wide receiver from Oklahoma State, who admittedly this season has, I don't know, well, let's say he wouldn't jump out on film. He would be on the scouting report. He wouldn't be someone to be ready for necessarily, right? And he did not score, to be fair to Houston. They kept him out of the end zone. But he had 15 catches for 189 yards. His previous high was a 97-yard performance against Oklahoma. Besides that, he had 62 against West Virginia. This is not a guy that gets the ball a lot, right? Houston let him catch the ball 15 times. He's not this explosive, crazy speed demon of a wideout. And they made him look like they got that guy drafted. They made that guy an NFL football player on Saturday. And I have to say, at some point, it became very obvious they were going to hand it to Ollie or they're going to throw it to Brennan. And you got to figure that out at some point during the day. Now, AJ Halsey tweet. That's all ties to my defense thing. AJ Halsey tweet, if you missed it, AJ Halsey tweeted something along the lines of like "see you never" or something that sounded cryptically like "bye." I think that actually feeds into my theory about the coordinator. I'll tell you why. AJ Halsey transferred into Houston after 1 year in New Mexico, and he comes in as a one-time transfer. You get one-time transfers. You don't have to file anything, whatever. And to leave and play again right away, he'd have to file a waiver, right? He's from Houston. So to file a waiver, he'd have to say something along the lines of, I'm leaving home again. Most guys file the waiver to get closer to home for whatever reason. Sick parent, sick grandparent, just homesickness, whatever, right? And those are all diagnosed, like people file that all the time. So it says Walker, North Carolina, right? He's already at home. So he ain't filing it for that. Unless he would sit out his junior season and then only get to play 1 year out of the rest of his college career, I don't think he transfers. What I do think happens, though, as a safety who's playing a defense in his first year in the Houston defense, keep that in mind, I cryptically wonder if he's saying bye to someone who is leaving. And I'll leave it at that. I wonder if he knows something or has some sort of a vibe, or if there was some sort of a woe was us kind of mood going around, because I think the emotions, and talking to a few guys, I think the emotions wore down a little bit. I would read that out of the tweet, that he's saying someone else is gone. I've said before, I think that Doug Belk is a sacrificial lamb. I think the defense needs a lot of work. I think defense had a lot of holes. I could put those together directly, but I don't want to jump too far based on a 20-year-old's tweet after a football game. But Kyle asked, and that's my 2 cents on it. Looking around the Big 12, and I say this with Texas and Iowa State are actually in a close game over here on my screen right here. As I look around the Big 12, you have Kansas State beating Kansas by a whopping 4 points. That's a fun rivalry. They're both good. Oklahoma barely beat BYU. Obviously, there's our game. West Virginia beat Cincinnati, which adds to the chaos, in my opinion, that is this conference. West Virginia beat Cincinnati by 21 points. Cincinnati beat us by 10 points. We beat West Virginia kind of twice in the same football game. That's a weird set of circumstances. Weird. West Virginia beat Cincinnati. TCU put the beat down on Baylor. For what it's worth, they beat Baylor, I believe, worse than they beat us. We beat Baylor by a point. And then Texas Tech beat Central Florida 24-23. Again, I'm not reading a whole lot into these scores anymore because of how weird this league has gotten. As far as like transitive property kind of stuff, I don't feel worried about Central Florida next week, because while, yes, they lost to Texas Tech by 1 point and we lost by 21 points, and they beat West Virginia, or they beat Oklahoma State 45-3, and we just lost to Oklahoma State. They lost Central Florida has lost to West Virginia, who Houston again kind of beat twice. Central Florida lost to Baylor, who Houston beat and didn't play particularly well while doing, like, it's a weird league, right? It's a weird league. And so it's just interesting to look around it right now. The big thing to keep an eye on, if you're looking, is that UT Austin is only up by 10 points against Iowa State, and Iowa State has the ball with 4 minutes left and is marching. Just kidding. Someone got sacked. But Texas lacks sexy win since week 2. Worth keeping an eye on them lacking another one. Now, there's no easy way. It said that tonight was going to be a transition night of sorts, a weird night of sorts, because I also want to move into talking some about the basketball program. But before I move into talking about the basketball program, I do want to say, on your audio feeds and Sunday, this be cut up where you have like a football episode and a basketball episode. It'll make more sense later, I promise. So if you're listening to this after the fact, if you want to hear something similar but about basketball, jump on over. Second, then we'll do more football recapping on Monday and Tuesday, I'm sure, and then we'll get ready for Central Florida next weekend to wrap up the football season, as Houston is out of bowl eligibility. But for now, let's jump on in and talk some about the basketball program, because the basketball program is doing particularly well, I'd say, particularly well. Now, for those who have not paid attention, Houston did move up to number 6 in the AP poll this week, and they took the number 6 ranking on the road with them to Charleston to play in the Charleston Classic. Now, Charleston Classic is interesting in that it's got a bunch of it's got some good mid-major basketball teams in it. Obviously, we're going to talk some about Dayton in a second, but in the Charleston Basketball Classic, Charleston Children's Charleston Basketball Classic. That's way too hard for me to say. I don't know why. You had Houston beat Towson in the opening round. We talked about that ad nauseum the other day. St. John's beat North Texas on the other side of the bracket. That St. John's, led by one Rick Pitino, beat North Texas by a whopping 1 point. So shout out to North Texas on that one. You then had Dayton beat LSU, the same SEC LSU that's actually got some good transfers in right now. Dayton beat them by 3 whole points. And then there was one more later that night. That was Utah and Wake Forest. Houston obviously played Utah again on Friday. Now, at the end of the episode, I'll talk more about some stuff going on. But Friday, as teacher and coach, I coach basketball. We had a game. And so in driving out to the middle of nowhere to play that game, playing the game and coming back, I ended up watching the game at like 11 o'clock until almost 1 o'clock when I was done watching it on Friday night and Saturday morning. And so I want to talk a little bit about that one here, because frankly, I do feel like that one's worth breaking down some. Houston went into the Utah game. People were really, really worried about it. People were really, really worried for a number of reasons about the size that Utah proposed. I mean, Utah started 2 7-footers, and they started a 6'6" and a 6'7" with those 2 7-footers, and their point guard was 6'4". And what is Houston gonna do? And the truth is that Houston did fine, right? By my box score here, Houston had 39 total rebounds. By my box score here, Utah had 35 total rebounds. So Houston out-rebounded this team of giants from Utah, right? The giants from the mountains came down, and Houston beat them up on the boards. If anything, the thing that kept Utah in the game as competitive as it was, before we get into like the ins and outs of the basketball game, was their own shooting. Obviously, being able to shoot over the top helps a whole heck of a lot. But Gabe Madsen, their point guard, the 6'4" guy, he went 8 of 15 from the three-point line. 8 of 15. He shot 15 threes in a college basketball game. I played 37 minutes, but he shot 15 threes. Houston was somewhat reprieved to see Brandon Carlson only go 2 for 8. He went 4 for 7 against Wake Forest the night before, and so obviously that was nice to see him get cool off a little bit. And those are the only 2 guys that made a 3. So obviously carried a lot by Gabe Madsen in this one. Outside of those 2 guys, they did not have a single guy in double figures. It's a big step up, or speaks very loudly, I should say, to the Houston Cougar defense. I don't know if people were paying attention to the Houston Cougar defense, but they did exactly what I told you they would do. So if you listen to Locked on Cougs on Friday morning, you're like, what's Houston going to do against Utah? You heard me talk about it. And then they did it. And I feel really, really vindicated in doing that. I feel really, really good about doing that. Hope you made me laugh. I still cannot believe Kelvin is in the 70s. He looks great. If I am as into it, as put together, as on it, and frankly, as passionate about what I'm doing in my 70s as Kelvin Sampson is, I will be living right. I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%. So in this game, the defense, Kelvin run up transition, was they would put a great deal of ball pressure on the Utah guards as they crossed half court. They played a lengthy number of guards. They played Dunn. They played Arsenault. They did a lot of different stuff that were really, really interesting. And like they trapped from the weak side when they crossed half court. And then the way they rotated was they actually, like, if you watch it back, and I admittedly have DVR, and that's how I got to watch the game. And so I could actually hit rewind a couple times. When they would trap up near half court, the guy that was open was standing like down by the basket, right? They trapped from so far away and then rotated, where they would trap the guy and then rotate over and cut off the first pass. And frankly, from a sky shot view, they could have been giving up layups. So because of the ball pressure, because of the length, and because of how tightly covered those guys in those traps were, it made a difficult pass impossible, where all of a sudden you have to like lob the ball up with the guys in your face and ball pressure and flipping it up. And with the ball in the air and that ball pressure meant that was A, rotating defenders could move while the ball was in the air, as every good basketball coach will ever tell you needs to happen. And B, a lot of times, which led to a bunch of steals for Houston. Houston had 10 steals in this basketball game. And then Utah themselves had 15 turnovers, so 5 other turnovers. How those were created, though, were that with the ball is in the air so long, Cougars could run under it, Cougars could tip it, Cougars could get deflections, and it frustrated Utah so much at various points of the ball game. It is an exhausting style of basketball to play. Absolutely exhausting. And on the second night of a back-to-back, what I think you saw happen in that like middle of the second half kind of portion was Houston kind of had to peel off it a little bit because they were running low on gas. I mean, as deep as Houston goes, that's that tiring a level of basketball to play. They do that. Utah gets right back in it. They had a couple of threes on Madsen. He gets hot. He gets comfortable. Suddenly, we got a ball game, right? I thought it was interesting that, in sticking with this one, and this will be the last point before the break, I was interesting that Malik Wilson played so little. Malik Wilson's a guy I think is very valuable to this team. I think one of the things that hurt last year's team in March was Jamal Shead being worn out by the time it got to March. Malik Wilson's a great backup for him. He's long. They can play together when you need to. They can play, either one can play with LJ Cryer. Malik Wilson's a very fun backup point guard. But what's interesting is that in this game, when it was this kind of close and it was this kind of an opponent at this point in the year, it's November, we're still before Thanksgiving, folks. Kelvin Sampson very clearly said, I'm not going to go with the guy I hadn't seen play a whole lot yet. Jamal Shead, you got it. And Jamal Shead played 34 minutes, by far and away his most minutes of any game this year. He played 34 against Utah. He played 24 against Towson, 28 against Stetson, and he was in the teens against A&M Corpus, and Louisiana Monroe. So, again, that's a lot more minutes on Jamal Shead, but it's a game you got to win against a good opponent. They knew they had Saturday off, and they get to play on Sunday evening, right? It's like a 7:30 Central Time game. Maybe at 7:30. I forget 7:30 Central East. You can put this in the comments. And so, you got this big layoff after you get almost 48 full hours because the time the game was on 3:30 on Friday, right? And so if you can push Jamal Shead for 34 minutes, you do it. Now, he also looked like a little winded and had 2 key turnovers at the later portion of the game that kind of kept this game closer than it needed to have, except you had one outstanding performance down the stretch. And so let's talk a little bit about outstanding performances, and that would be our buddies over at Athletic Brewing making game changers themselves. The game changer in this one is LJ Cryer, who had back-to-back threes from the corner in a very crucial moment of the game where it felt like Utah was coming back. Utah went zone. Utah tried to trap out of the zone. Houston was able to break the traps, find LJ in the corner, hit back-to-back threes. Now, Cryer led the way. Cryer led the Stars, I should say, with 14 points. So 6 of those 14 came with those crucial last few minutes of the basketball game where he knocked down his big threes and he changed the game. If you're trying to change the game, you get a non-alcoholic brew. You get an award-winning one with Athletic Brewing because they're fit for all times. You can do them all day long at wherever you're at. No hangovers after, no sluggishness after. You can go do whatever you want to after, and you can do all those things with a non-alcoholic, award-winning brew from Athletic Brewing. You go to athleticbrewing.com, use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, and get 15% off your first order. That's LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off your first order at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing, fit for all times. Now, I think it's interesting, and this is the thing I'm going to keep writing, I think, until something happens about it. They've got legitimately 9 guys, I think, that can play high-level Division I basketball. Kyle actually, that's funny timing, Kyle. Kyle says our rotation is too deep right now. Our guys can't get into a flow. The rotation has to be 8 guys by conference. I kind of think we're going to get there, and I don't know who's getting squeezed. We're currently playing about 9. I went 9 deep against Utah, and Ramon Walker did not play. We've seen Ramon Walker do important things for good basketball teams. And so I could see how he could work his way into a 9-man rotation. But I think you're right that generally speaking, we're playing 2 games a week. You need 8, right? That said, I'm not quite sure I know who's getting squeezed yet, but I think we can effectively say that starting Damian Dunn has not left him super comfortable. He was a backup for the majority of the year last year at Temple, and he was still first or second in points for nearly every one of their games while he was doing it. He would come in on the first whistle of some games. I mean, it was just he wanted to get off the bench into the flow of the game. He came off the bench for the first 3 games for Houston and led Houston in points. Was second in Houston in points 2 of the 3. So he's been a starter in this Charleston Classic. He started against Towson. He had no points. He started against Utah. He had 7 points, and 5 of those 7 were in the second half when he was coming off the bench. I think we've got something here that's interesting in that he's actually more comfortable after he sits for a second and comes in the game somewhat fresh, right? And not some guys like, I can't come in the game stiff, right? Damian clearly is like, I can come in the game and get loose quickly. I'd rather y'all have been running for a couple minutes and I'll catch up, right? Meanwhile, Emmanuel Sharp continues to light up. Emmanuel Sharp, for what it's worth, folks, is playing his way into pro conversations. Terrence Arsenault, I think, could also be a pro. Jamal Shead to get a shot somewhere. He's just a very much like a solid college point guard that does a lot of things that college teams value. The pro teams are still like, but can you shoot it, right? Emmanuel Sharp is turning into a pro, and right before our eyes had 15 points. And frankly, what I would have described the first half of that game being a struggle, his overall shooting numbers are not great. 6 of 13, 1 of 4 from 3. His 3 was crucial down the stretch. I feel like it's interesting to look at Emmanuel Sharp's game because he has the quick trigger release. He has broad shoulders. He's in so much better shape this year physically than he was last year. And props to him and Coach Bishop and the crew for that. I mean, that's hard work. That is not easy to do. And I was really, really impressed by him throughout. In the Utah game, I have other things I want to say. I want to say, first of all, thank you to Utah for zoning us. I don't know why teams would ever look at Houston and zone them, especially when you're so much bigger. I get that it's tough to guard Houston on the perimeter, but I'd run a pack line or something. I would not. Maybe I shouldn't say it out loud. Other teams don't do it. I don't want to. I don't know why he'd play zone. You're just giving up threes. Houston's got a ton of guards, ton of shooters. They'll find someone hot, right? They'll find someone hot. On the game, Houston did just shoot 33% from 3. But again, they were searching for who that hot person was. It was not Damian Dunn. He missed his only attempt. Anyway, I just don't know why they ran zone. I thank them for running zone. I don't think you'll see zone from Dayton on Sunday. Now, Dayton comes in as a top-ranked mid-major team of sorts. They are ranked 58th in KenPom right now in the Atlantic 10 Conference. They're currently the highest ranked in the Atlantic 10 Conference on KenPom. KenPom is interesting in how they rank teams because it kind of alters throughout the year. But the A10, they've got Dayton, St. Bonnie's, George Mason, Loyola Chicago, Davidson, GW. They've got teams you've heard of from the tournament, that's what I'm getting at, right? They've got teams you heard from the tournament, and typically one of them is pretty good. This year, that team appears to be Dayton, and that's who Houston has a date with. Yeah, like transition there on Sunday night. Dayton is interesting to watch because they're very high in how many three-pointers they attempt per game. They shoot a large percentage of their shots from behind the arc. They run at a relatively slow pace to the nation, but actually a faster pace than Utah or Towson or Stetson have. So, like, it'll feel a little faster maybe, but that's actually just because of how slow the previous couple games were in terms of possessions per game and how much of the shot clock they're using per possessions. They have a fairly average size team. They're not tall like Utah or what have you. Deron Holmes, we're getting a long roundabout way. Deron Holmes is the guy to keep your eye on. He's the 6'10 junior forward. He is all A10 tournament, all A10 defense. He was all A10 freshman. It's a freshman. He is really, really talented. He's a junior. He is 6'10". He is shooting the ball from behind the arc well this year. He's averaging, what's this number here? 33% on 3 attempts per game. So he's making a 3 every game. I will say in the limited sample size that is the 4 games so far this season for them, that's a good improvement. He has not typically been that guy in his career, so I don't know if that's a 6'10 guy trying to add that to his game to go pro. I don't know if that's an anomaly because of the season he's had, but Houston should probably look to cover him behind the arc. He's their leading point man, though. He's getting 16 points per game this season, had 18 points per game for them last season. He'll probably be in contention for the A10 MVP across the board. Other guys to keep an eye on, their point guard, Javon Bennett, 5'10", 155, smaller guy. Houston's actually going to be bigger at point guard for a change, but he's a lightning bug. He's super, super fast. He can shoot the ball all right, but he's really more of a distributor, really more of a pick and roll guy, finding homes, pick and roll, kicking it out. They got other guys to do the shooting when they need it. One of those guys is Kobe Brea, B-R-E-A. He's shooting the ball pretty well from behind the arc. On the season, he's actually shooting 45%. Again, I think that's mostly small sample size, but he's a shooter. So they run these different pick and roll types of actions in a bunch of different spots on the floor. They like the slot, but they run a bunch of different spots on the floor and run pick and roll actions, kick the ball out from there. I think Houston will be okay because they're going to monster trap off the screen, rotate over and help the helper, and cut off the roller man, and make the difficult but open pass all the way across court into the lob pass, much like we saw against Utah from half court into the baseline down by the basket. It'll be like a diagonal pass across the corner. It's a crazy difficult pass that I think Houston's going to force. And frankly, when the ball's in the air that long, we know they go and get it. I think Houston wins this game by around 10 again. It'll be competitively at like 7-8, and then free throws, if we can make our darn free throws, we should be in at around 10, if I'm making predictions here. And then Houston will probably move up in the rankings again on Monday into that 5 spot with an impressive defensive performance because they've played so many basketball games this week, and they typically reward people for those kinds of things. Now, if you're talking about rewarding for things or moving into winning on things, and you're feeling like winning your own kinds of things, then you need to make sure you go to prizepicks.com and win something today. PrizePicks is doing all kinds of daily fantasy sports things. You can pick stats and go over under. You can even combine sports while there's this equinox for football and basketball and stuff all happening at once. You can say, I think Travis Kelce is going to have Travis Kelce and LeBron James plus minus 10.5 receptions and threes made. So Travis Kelce gets 7 receptions. LeBron James gets 4 threes. Boom. That's your 11. LeBron James is shooting well from 3 this year. It's not a bad take there. They also have this great reboot policy for if you have a guy injured, they can get rebooted if they don't come back in the second. If they get injured in the first half and they don't come back in the second half, you can get that money back. All kinds of cool things happening on PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's Locked On College is the promo code at prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. And you put in $100, they'll match it with their own 100. PrizePicks, go win today. All right. Last but not least, I do, because Houston is relevant nationally, want to point out a couple things. One, Houston is atop the KenPom. KenPom is a series of mathematical analytical equations done by one Ken Pomeroy, and he has Houston at the top of the country, number 1 ranked in KenPom, followed by Purdue, Kansas, UConn, and Alabama. You'll notice one of those teams is in our conference this year. The third Big 12 team is Baylor. So whatever that's worth. You got Baylor following up at 9 overall. All of those teams are undefeated on the season so far. And if you look around college basketball, look at what's happening in college basketball, I think it's really interesting that we're like getting Houston's tournament underway now, because truthfully, a lot of these major tournaments are happening in the coming week. You'll see different people out in Hawaii playing, coaches in aloha shirts and that kind of stuff. And people are asking like, well, what do I need to pay attention to for the Cougs? And if you can't tell from the way I talk about football, it was a little different in the American Athletic Conference because admittedly, Houston was at the cream of the crop in that, and they were not worried about missing the tournament the last couple of years if they didn't win the conference outright, obviously. But in the Big 12, I don't think there's any worry about missing the tournament to say, but I do look around the conference kind of seeing where things will shake up. And so like starting on Sunday, you've got a handful of Big 12 teams in different, Kansas State's playing the Bahamas Championship, Texas in the Empire Classic. Obviously, you got Houston and Charleston, but you got like Cincinnati playing Northern Kentucky. That same Northern Kentucky team that gave us so much trouble to start the NCAA tournament last year is playing Cincinnati, right? You can go to later this week. West Virginia is playing in the Fort Myers tip-off. I think they're playing SMU, actually, in the Fort Myers tip-off. Maui Invitational tips off. You got Kansas in that. Kansas in a loaded field at the Maui Invitational. All kinds of fun things happening this week. And so what I'm doing is watching how Kansas matches up in the Maui Invitational, because it's a loaded field, and I think of Houston as being one of the best teams in the country. And I think of Kansas being one of the best teams in the country, and they see teams like Gonzaga. Let me pull this up to be sure. They got Gonzaga, they got Creighton, they got UCLA, Tennessee, Purdue, Syracuse, like big name teams in that one, right? And so if you think like, well, how's Kansas going to match up with Houston? I've got eyes on that one this week to make sure I pay attention. Same kind of thing with Xavier, same kind of thing with Baylor, same kind of thing across the board in the Big 12. I'm looking at where they're playing their big games because Houston, after playing on Sunday, is actually off for several days. I think getting their tournament play out of the way on the early side of it, and then not coming back again until Friday. Friday sounds right. They got Montana, and I don't think it's on Thanksgiving Day, so I think it's Friday. Montana is coming to us. It's nice to have a game at home after playing a few in Charleston, South Carolina. So if you're in Houston for Thanksgiving, got family coming to town, etc., go check out this one. It'll be, I think it's an afternoon game. ESPN says it's at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. That's a fun one for sure, but that's the only game for Houston this upcoming week. So after they win Sunday night, it's a nice long week of recovery, to say the least. And that's, I think, why my eyes are elsewhere across the conference, across the country. The nice thing about being the Big 12 is across the conference is kind of across the country, right? It's got all over, all kinds of things everywhere. It does look like, and speaking about the Big 12, as we're recording this, I think Texas did pull off the win at Iowa State. So there's that. Still not a sexy win for them in a while. All right. So I want to wrap up by talking about some people asked me. Well, first of all, I want to point out that today's episode is like this long, crazy, lengthy one. It'll be split up on Sunday and put into different news feeds across the board. If you want a more basketball specific, only listen to the basketball half, or football specific, and only listen to the football half. If you think some of this is sounding somewhat repetitive, I'm sorry. If you listen to the two episodes separately, that's the case. People asked me on Saturday, and I want to wrap up by talking about this. Okay. People asked me on Saturday, Parker, you're tweeting a lot about Kansas today. And Kansas was very front of mind. Kansas was very front of mind. I don't know if you guys have clicked on the show. I was, born in Houston, and I went to middle school and high school in Austin. And I had a teacher there who passed away on Friday, and her name was Coach Adams. Coach Adams was a PE teacher, a girls basketball coach. Would eventually become a director of equity and inclusion and work her way up to administration. And she had two different long bouts of cancer for ultimately passing away on Friday. Her son is one, KJ Adams. KJ Adams plays for Kansas. If you've not heard KJ Adams' name before. And so I say to say that while Coach Adams, who was, I'm a teacher and coach, I reflect a lot on teachers and coaches that meant a lot to me. And Coach Adams was a very friendly, welcome face to myself and many people on our campus. Once upon a time, I met KJ when he was a little kid. And so I think the story did catch a little bit of legs. And so I was tweeting a lot about Kansas because it was catching legs Saturday morning. And people were like, Parker's tweeting a lot about Kansas. That's weird. And so I wanted to point out why, because Coach Adams was an amazing teacher, an amazing, I talked to other teachers now and then in this industry, colleague. She was an amazing coach, state championship winning coach. She was an amazing mom to Brittany, KJ, and Jayla. Her husband, Kevin, would say the same thing about her being a wife. Sister to her brother, Marcus. Coach Adams is really, really special. I could tell a couple different stories, but the one I think that sticks out in my head is I'm still feeling out of place in Austin, even though I've been there for a little bit at this point. I'm at a new private school after I've been to a public school for a couple years before, in 6th grade PE. And Coach Adams was like a record holder at Texas A&M as a basketball player. And we're playing some game where, like, you shoot from the elbow, you get 2 points. If you make it, you get make a layup, you get a 3rd point. How many can you and your partner get, and whatever? And I didn't have a teammate. I was kind of an odd man out. I was kind of a weirdo. And KJ and Coach Adams wanted to be on my team, and she's like went out of the way. And again, this is a record holder at Texas A&M. Wanted to be on my team, and so Coach stepped in, and she did, and and asked Coach, why are you on Parker's team? Like, why would you be on Parker's team? I'm the chunky weirdo. I liked basketball a lot, and I thought I was all right at it, but why do you want to be on Parker's team? Why is coach on Parker's team? She was like, someone's got to be on his team, and it's me. I'm going to be on Parker's team. And I don't know that she ever really knew what that meant to sixth grade Parker, but it meant a lot. And she was a dorm parent. She was a dorm parent to kids at half boarding school. So she was a little second mom to a lot of people on campus. She was a great mom to people that she was the mom to. And she was briefly a fantastic grandmother as well. While she got to enjoy that part of her life while she was here. Coach Adams, I miss you a lot. It was hard to see that Friday night when I got home at like 11. I think that ultimately led to me staying up and watching a lot of basketball, because that's something that I guess I tie close to the people that were important to me. So if you saw me tweeting a lot about Kansas, that's why. And I'm sorry I'm getting emotional talking about it at the end. But Coach Adams is really, really special. And her son, KJ, is a tremendous basketball player at Kansas. And so if you see me talking about KJ in Kansas, that's why. And I hope that makes some more sense. With that said, we're going to wrap that one up tonight. Tonight's episode of Locked On Cougs. Cougs After Dark covered the highs of the basketball season, the lows of the football season, and the lower lows that exist sometimes. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Locked On Cougs is a daily show each and every day. We appreciate you tuning in and making sure first, or on Cougars After Dark episode's last listen of the day. Make sure to go check out Locked On Big 12. Drake's doing a great job with breaking down the whole conference. Locked On Cougs, Prime Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs. Miss you, Coach.